research, and then we try to identify the main features of a research paper, and then try to understand. This is what we are going to do. So when we read a paper, first we try to understand the main idea or the theme of that paper. For example, suppose you read the book or read the paper, and then somebody asks from you, okay, what does it say? Then you must be able to say in few words, okay, this paper says this. And then we ask, okay, what is the argument of this paper? Argument means what is that particular thing which the paper tries to establish. So then we must be able to understand that. Now usually, reading carefully is very important just to get this basic knowledge. Now very often we know in our life is too short to read all the books. Okay, there are so many things to read. But whenever you take any new book or any new paper, what you can do is, you just look at carefully the introductory part. And then you also look at the concluding part and see what that paper is doing. Now, when you understand that what that paper or what that book is intended to do, then you can decide if you want to read it completely. You can decide to read it completely. Or if you think that, this is not going to be relevant to you, then you can skip that. You are not going to read it. Now, the important thing is in any academic writing, you must be able to see that. So now, our reading a paper means we are reading to see this connection. And also, we say we follow the argument in the sense, okay, the author of the paper is trying to say something. But of course, he must be able to prove it, establish it, say it, and then we can see whether the author has really established it. So, so reading a paper is now, reading this paper, of course, a very familiar subject about the meditation and the jhanas. But I will be selecting little bit different things later, but we will today start with this paper. But then again, when we conclude this exercise, we must be able to say what this paper is about, and then what are the main reasons given. And also, going a step further, you must be able to say, okay, it is a successful paper or not. Now, that is a judgment we are making on whatever we are reading. Now, as I said in my research methodology discussion, ultimately, you will have to have some judgment about what you read. Otherwise, you are just reading it, absorbing it, and then, okay, if there is nothing beyond that, then of course you are not making any your own contribution to it. But if you can find, if you think it is a very good paper, that's fine. Okay, that's also your judgment. Or if you think that it was not a very good paper, then that's again your judgment. So, in the academic writing, we are reading something critically, okay? So, reading something critically requires you to have certain questions in your mind, okay? So, exercise we are going to do in this, limited time we have got every week. We are reading something, you can say, reading critically. Reading critically means you are just not reading, as if you are just reading anything. But of course, you should read anything critically in the sense, in a way with an open mind, and also try to understand, grasp the argument, and then, critically appraise it. So therefore, you usually reading for, critical reading requires for you to look for certain things. For example, critical reading requires you to know something like, what does this paper? So this is one question. What does this paper aims to establish? It could be, what does this paper is trying to say? What does this paper trying to prove? What does this paper trying to establish? You know, any of these terms we can use. So what does this paper aims to establish? And then you look at, next one is, how does the author go about doing this? So the second thing is how. So then we have what question, and then we also want to know how. What are the techniques? What are the things the author does in order to do that? And also, critically reading something, we must also look for what are the certain, if there are assumptions. If there are certain assumptions behind this writing. Now, of course, assumptions are basically certain things we are not told directly. Whatever the assumptions a writer has, the writer will not say directly, these are my assumptions. But of course, very often writers assume certain things. Writers assume certain knowledge from us. Also, writers assume that certain things to be true or certain things to be false. Now, this assumption is a very interesting and important thing in academic writing. Sometimes, you know, the assumptions are questionable. You assume certain things, but what you assume may be not correct. So, your whole exercise depends on what are your unspoken, unstated assumptions. So, you need to look for those things. Now, when a paper writer writes something, you know, he or she assumes certain things. These are unstated things, but you know, then we can look for these things. And also we can look at, of course, sources, what kind of sources the person is using. Now, these are kind of, you know, the detailed things we must be keeping in our mind. What are the sources? And then finally, we can also look for, now something similar to the number one, we can look for what are the conclusions. But ultimately the conclusions drawn. Now, between these things, we can look for supporting evidence, supporting facts, when you look at the sources. So, all kinds of things. Now, this shows that reading an academic paper carefully requires you to be somewhat alert, and also you are engaging in an academic exercise, okay? So, what I thought is we will go through this paper, but I am not going to read word by word or something. That's not what I am going to do. But we will look at what the you know, the author is trying to say, and then try to understand. Now, in this exercise, one thing we can do is first we can go by we have the introductory section, then number one, number two, and you know, sections like that. Now, if you have anybody has any difficulties in the language or certain concepts or things you do not see or you do not understand, then you can ask, and you know, if I know, maybe I don't know all the words either, but you know, we can you know, look at them, and then we go on and we asking and trying to answer some of these questions. Now, when we look at the theme of this paper, I think all of you are familiar with this Susima Sutta of the Sangyutta Nikaya and the Wisdom Liberated Arahant, Panya Vimutta Arahant. So these two things, Susima Sutta in the Sangyutta Nikaya and Panya Vimutta Arahant. Now, this is a very interesting practice-related question in the Buddhist tradition. Now, particularly in this country, Myanmar, there has been very long tradition of meditation where Buddhist monks have been debating whether dhyana whether it is necessary or not in order to attain nirvana. Now there is a very long drawn Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw and subsequently, and several years ago I wrote a paper on this whole issue. I can make it available if you are interested. You can also have a look at. What I did was I studied this whole issue, started by Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, and then there was some kind of exchange of ideas between one Burmese Sayadaw and also a Sri Lankan Buddhist monk, Venerable Keminda. So these two monks exchange long articles about this whole issue. So therefore this problem discussed in the paper is interestingly quite familiar problem. And the Susima Sutta is also familiar to people who are studying this question. So therefore, this should not be a difficulty. Now, when we look at the very first page and then page 52 in the middle, this considered to be the introduction to the paper. Now, we will just go by section. Does anybody have any question or any problem about understanding this section? The topic is the nature of the Panya Vimutta Arahant. Now that is the topic that is being discussed in the sutta. Now if you read this first section carefully, you will see two things here. One thing is the author is Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. He is telling what he is going to do in this paper. And also he is telling us about the sources he is going to use, and he says establishes certain ways of abbreviation. Now whenever we want to do some academic study, those are useful things we can do. So we just give an indication about what we are going to do and the sources we are going to use, and also the abbreviations. Particularly in this case, he is using Sangyutta Nikaya discourse and then Sanyukta Agama and Vibhasha. So in that manner he is using 3 Chinese sources and 1 Pali source. Okay, those are the sources he is using, and then he is proposing to use certain abbreviations. Those are minor details. But when you read this first part, I think you have an answer to a very important question, namely question number 1. What does this paper aims to establish, or what does this paper is going to do? Can anybody answer that question? Because there is some indication to it in the first part of the paper. I mean, he simply indicates, he simply tells us what he is going to do. Now, okay, looking at the very first page, line 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, look at this sentence. The Susima Sutta merits a special consideration because the Pali version has 3 parallels preserved in Chinese translation. And thus a comparison of the Pali discourse with its Chinese counterparts permits us to see how, even in an early stage of textual transmission, the Buddhist schools were already in subtle ways contemplating different solutions to the doctrinal problem raised by the sutta. Now, this particular paragraph I just read gives you a clue what he is going to do in this paper, right? What do you think about it? The Susima Sutta merits a special consideration. Do you have any problem in understanding the language here? The Susima Sutta merits special consideration. What is the merits? Now, usually the word merit we are using for punya, but here it's not punya. Here the merit has been used as a verb.
Gives.
Merit means it deserves. It deserves to be studied. That is what merits means here. So it is not punya. So Susima Sutta merits special consideration. Susima Sutta deserves to be specially studied or considered because Pali version has 3 parallels. Parallel means similar things. Parallel preserved in Chinese translation. Thus, a comparison of the Pali discourse with the Chinese counterparts. Counterparts, any difficulty in that word to anybody? What is the counterpart? Chinese counterpart means? Now, the word counterpart we are using to indicate now the Pali Sutta, and it is Chinese counterpart means Chinese Sutta. So, counterpart means similar example in a different context. So, suppose, there are 2 Buddhist monks, one is from Myanmar, one is from Sri Lanka. You can say, my Sri Lankan counterpart, that means like me, who is from Sri Lanka. Or the Sri Lankan monk can say, my Burmese counterpart, in the sense, So, the Chinese counterpart means the parallel, similar versions in Chinese. With its Chinese counterparts permit to see how, even in an early stage of textual transmission, the Buddhist scholars were already in subtle ways contemplating different solutions to the doctrinal problem raised by the sutta. Now, actually, that particular couple of, the line tells you what he is doing. What is the purpose of writing this paper? What do you think? What is he doing? Why he has to study Susima Sutta and why he is getting these couple of Chinese parallels? What is the reason? What is the purpose? He wants to show the problem, but not only the problem. Why he is doing this comparison? Pardon me? In fact, look at this. Permits to see how, this is the important, permits to see how, even in an early stage of textual transmission, the Buddhist schools were already in subtle ways contemplating different solutions to the doctrinal problem raised in the sutta. So the idea is that there is a doctrinal problem raised in this sutta. So there is a doctrinal problem. Now, by looking at comparing with Chinese parallel translations, the author wants to show that, establish that even in the very early stage of transmission, the Buddhist monks or whoever transmitted these things were trying in a subtle ways contemplating different solutions. So in other words, it says that all traditions identify some common problem in this text. Now, the common problem in the text is whether one can attain arahanthood without attaining the jhanas. Now, this is the problem. So, basically the question is whether one can attain jhanas without attaining, attain arahanthood without attaining the jhanas. Broader question is whether jhanas are necessary. Now, there is the standard interpretation to this question. We usually go by Buddha Ghoshas, like Visuddhimagga, where you have to have initial jhana in order to attain arahanthood. But Susima Sutta is a very interesting example where it shows that maybe you don't have to have jhana. But then, can you really say that? How are you going to establish it? And also it seems to be going against the standard view. Standard view is that, you have to have jhanas. But, there has been many discussions about it. So, how to accommodate this view? Because in the discourses, although discourses are consistent with each other, there seems to be some lack of clarity. So you really don't know exactly what it is. Whether it is Rupa jhanas that are necessary, whether it is Arupa jhanas that are necessary, or whether you need any jhana in order to attain nirvana. Now, these are the questions. Now, more recently, teachers like Mahasi Sayadaw seem to have believed that you don't have any jhana. You don't need to have any jhana in order to attain nirvana, in order to follow the samatha, the vipassana. So, now in this paragraph, you read it, look at it again. The Susima Sutta merits a special consideration because the Pali version has 3 parallels preserved in Chinese translation. And thus a comparison of the Pali discourse with its Chinese counterparts permits us to see how even in an early stage of textual transmission, the Buddhist schools were already in subtle ways contemplating different solutions to the doctrinal problems raised by the... So, suppose you want to answer this question, okay? Suppose we are trying to answer this question. What does this paper try to establish? Now, our answer to this question will be, this paper tries to establish, the answer should be something like, how even in an, I'm not going to write the whole thing, even in an early stage of textual transmission, the Buddhist scholars were already in subtle ways contemplating different solutions to the doctrinal problems raised by the sutta. Now, this is the answer to this question. Okay, we raise what does the paper aims to establish. Now, establish, say, prove, or whatever, you can put any word. Answer is that how even in and so on, raised by the sutta. So, now if you agree with that, if that is the main thing, then of course you can read the paper to see whether the author is doing this. Now, when you completely read the paper, you can see whether the author has really done this, right? Do you agree that this is what the author want to do? Is that acceptable? Yeah?
I disagree.
Pardon me?
Because when we translate something special, for the canon, we just translate maybe from Bali to our own language.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to make a problem in
What do you mean? I didn't get that.
Here the aims of the order, maybe political.
Yeah?
He make in order to solve the problem in
Not only the problem, actually he wants to show that in the ancient time, those who transmitted these sutras were aware of the problem and they were trying to solve this problem in some manner. Now that is what, comparing, they were contemplating different solutions to the doctrinal problem raised by them. So there is a doctrinal problem. Now what he says is, when you look at the Pali and Chinese, you can see that these Chinese versions are also a way to answer this question. Because the question is, whether usually we say Sila Samadhi Panya. Now within Samadhi we include jhanas. Now the doctrinal problem is, whether one can attain nirvana without jhanas, or whether one can skip jhana aspect and one can go to vipassana directly. Now this is the doctrinal question. So now here, Venerable, something very interesting is this. Challenging is this. Now we are going by the Pali text. Okay. Now similarly, Sarvastivada and other traditions also had their own text. Now the thing is, we accept the Pali text, and Sarvastivada and other traditions also had the text. Now, in one way, we think that, the discourses we have received in the canon are exactly how the Buddha taught. But now, look at this Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. He's even more Theravada than many Theravada monks. Okay, he's very ardent Theravadi. But even himself, he thinks that these suttas have been the edited, and redactor means actually one who really memorizes and continues it in the tradition. So there have been certain some way of compiling these suttas. So so that these suttas have been included with certain things. So we are into some kind of critical textual study. It is not that, okay, this is exactly what the Buddha said. So in that sense, reading Bhikkhu Bodhi is very important, interesting, because you can see that how a particular sutta. Now, we have the Theravada tradition, but the Mula Sarvastivada or the Sarvastivada tradition has their own text. Now, which text is more reliable? Because Sarvastivada also, we have to admit that they are also good Buddhists, right? So others are also good Buddhists. Nobody is a bad Buddhist. But, depending on the different traditions, they preserve text differently. So this exercise is very good in that sense. Now what he says is, there is a common problem here identified in Chinese tradition. Chinese means, of course, this is not Chinese Mahayana, right? These are preserved in Chinese language, but the text belonging to the different early Nikayas. So even in these early Nikayas, what the Bhikkhu Bodhi want to show is, when you compare and contrast these suttas, parallel versions, you can see that they were aware of that there was a problem and how to solve that. The problem is this. In the Susima Sutta, Susima asked from these monks whether they had attained Arupa and higher things. But the important question is, why not asking about basic four jhanas? The Susima doesn't ask about the basic four jhanas. He only asks about Arupa. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the Chinese version, in Chinese version, they ask from the first jhana to second jhana to third jhana to fourth jhana to very clearly. Susima asks not only about Arupa jhana, he is also asking about the Rupa jhana. So he starts questioning Rupa jhana number 1, then bhikkhus say no, Rupa jhana 2, bhikkhus say no, so like that. But in the Theravada tradition, because our tradition was such, in the Visuddhi Magga, we believe that you can never go to Panya without jhanas. So in the Theravada tradition, they have left first 4 jhanas intact. So you have to attend first 4 jhanas. Only Susima's question is about Arupa, okay, according to Theravada Sutta. But when you look at the Chinese versions and some other discourses in the tradition, you can see that it is not only Arupa jhana, even there was a question about Rupa jhana. That's one thing. And also, Bhikkhu Bodhi makes it very clear, when you go to the commentary, commentators seem to be that accepting that, yes, you can attain, you can go to Panya without jhanas. Now, whole concept of Sukha Vipassaka. Okay? So this is a very important doctrinal problem, okay? So now what he is trying to show is that even in early stage of textual transmission, the Buddhist schools were already in subtle ways contemplating different solutions to the doctrinal problem raised by the sutta. Okay, do you think, do we agree with that? Can we go ahead? Do you think that, okay, this is what Bhikkhu Bodhi want to show to us? Now, this very important thing is, in any good academic writing, you should at the very beginning indicate what you are going to do, okay? What you are going to, accomplish in your writing. And then he is talking about other things about the method. He is talking a little bit about the method he is using. Now, this part of the discussion is very important. When you do your own writing, the beginning to up to number 1 here is writer is talking about the certain conventions and methods he is going to use in this article. Okay. Now, it is very important for you to make that kind of initial preliminary to make some statements. Okay. Is that clear? Is that part clear to you? There is nothing that you will not understand here, but what I'm asking is, is that basic part is clear to you? Okay, then we will move on to the next part, that is the plot. Now, what is the plot means here? Yeah, plot is actually the scheme you are going to follow. But then in this context, the plot has another meaning, because this whole thing is Susima is coming and becoming a disciple of the Buddha as a result of a conspiracy. Because, other religious people were worried that they do not receive any respect from the people as they used to. So they sent Susima to some kind of spying, as a spy, to enter into the sasana and get the secret of, getting this, all these, the good treatments from the people. So in that sense also there is a plot here. Plot means some kind of secretive plan here. But also you have to understand, plot means the main, the scheme of the thing. So in that sense also you can say plot. So you can see the plot here has more than one meaning. Okay, the plot means the unraveling of, the revealing the main scheme of the whole sutta, and also there is some kind of hidden program also behind Susima's act that can also be called the plot. That section which goes up to page 55, do you have any questions? I mean, it simply discusses the sutta, opens with the Buddha dwelling in bamboo grove and so on. Do you have any statement or anything that you think difficult to understand? Now, this is basically summary of Susima Sutta. Then page 54, you have, a simple answer. First, Susima, there is knowledge of the persistence of principles. Afterwards, knowledge of Nibbana. Now, this is Pubbeko Susima Dhammatthiti Jnanam Pacha Nibbana Jnanam. So, this is translated as persistence of principles. Dhammatthiti. Dhamma is translated as principles. Thiti means persistence. So the knowledge of the persistence of principles. Dhamma. Pacha Nibbane Jnanam. Afterwards the knowledge in the Nibbana. Susima asked the Buddha to explain this concise statement in detail. Concise statement in details. Sankittena bhasitassa vitharena atthaṃ vibhajitum. The Buddha first responds simply by repeating his reply. Whether or not you understand, Susima, the first there is knowledge of the persistence of principles, afterwards knowledge of Nibbana. Now in the Pali Sutta, it doesn't say that Buddha knew why Susima came into the sasana. But however, the Chinese version says that Buddha knew why Susima came to the sasana. Okay? But here, of course, it is not specifically mentioned. However, he then tries to guide Susima to an understanding of his word. He first leads him through the catechism on the 3 characteristics. What is catechism? catechism is basically question and answer method. So you can have, you ask the question, then you answer. You ask the question. So in the discourses, you find Buddha's niccang va aniccang, and then, okay. So it goes like Buddha asks questions, and then, so catechism is that type of asking questions and answering. That is basically catechism. Catechism on the three characters, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Buddha goes on asking impermanence, suffering, and non-self. In relation to the five aggregates, exactly we find it in the second argument of the well-known Anattalakkana Sutta. Now, second argument of the, what do you mean by argument there? Bhikkhu Bodhi used the word argument, second argument in the Anattalakkana Sutta. Now, the argument he uses in somewhat different sense here. Now, in the Anattalakkana Sutta, Buddha gives reasons to establish that things are anatta. So, each reason is described here as argument. Okay. Discourse on the characteristic of no self. This culminates in the noble disciple becoming disenchanted with the five aggregates. Culminates in the noble disciple becoming disenchanted. Okay, finally it leads to. And then it goes on. Look at the last paragraph of that. Susima does not reply to the Buddha's question. Instead, he prostrates himself at the Buddha's feet, confesses that he entered the Buddhist order with thievish intent, with some kind of bad intent, and asks the Blessed One to pardon him for his offense. The Buddha then tells him that he was indeed foolish to have contemplated such a dangerous course of action. To underscore the danger, he relates a simile about a criminal who is arrested by the king and beheaded to the south of the city. The consequence of going forth as a thief in the well-expounded Dhamma and discipline, Buddha says, are far graver than the punishment suffered by the criminal. But since Susima sees his transgression for what it is, he pardons him for the sake of his future restraint. Transgression is apatti, violation, transgression. So this basically is the what the discourse. So the part one is summary of the discourse, and then do you have any difficulty, anything there? Anybody? Okay. So section 2. The liberated by wisdom. Now, actually, the most important part of the discussion is this. Sanyutta 1270, as we have just seen, when Susima questioned the monks about their attainments, he asked about the five mundane super knowledges and the peaceful, formless emancipation. In fact, these translations are very important. We have still not established exactly not established exact English translation, but very often we can take Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations as pretty much established. So, five mundane super knowledges. Super knowledge means abhinya. Peaceful, formless emancipations. Formless, arupa. Arupa, emancipations, vimutti. So, arupa. And it is these that monks deny possessing. So in the Susima Sutta, the monks say that they do not have what? The peaceful, formless emancipations and mundane super knowledges. It is intriguing that Susima questions do not pry into the attainments that the monks might possess below the level of formless emancipation. Monks do not pry into any attainments. What is this pry into any attainment? Susima doesn't really inquire deeply. That is what prying means. He does not pry into any attainments. He does not question about these things. Now, below arupa, there are rupa jhana, but Susima doesn't question about them. I assume that whatever might have been the historical basis for the origination of this sutta, the actual dialogue, particularly in the first part, is partly the work of the compilers of the text. Now, according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, first part of the dialogue in the sutta is the work of the compilers of the text. So the first part is compilers of the text. Of course, the sutta has a story at the very beginning. Who Susima, why he came into, and what he wanted to do, and so on. So these are there. So according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, I assume that whatever might have been the historical basis for the origination of this sutta, the actual dialogue, particularly in the first part, is part of the work of the compilers of the text. Now, that's important because whenever you have a dialogue, how do you really have this dialogue? Now, here we have a recording, right? So once we have the recording, later we can listen to the recording and write. Now, when the Buddha had the discussion with Susima, do we think that somebody was recording these things? No. And there was no way to record. Now, you can see that this is a story that monks remembered, and then monks made the conversation, Buddha asking questions, Susima giving answers. But that is part of the compiler's work, what really happened, So then, it is interesting to see there is a reason why they made this sutta, why they reported this, what is the reason of that. So very often we do not see this part because all the suttas we can see, of course, this doesn't mean that there is any problem with the Dhamma Buddha taught, but the presentation has been organized in such a manner by a group of people or one author, right? That is clear. So when we say that Susima came for this purpose, and he had these wrong views in his mind. He was sent by the Anyatithiyas. Now all these are stories. So the compilers making these things. We may infer that the compilers of the sutta had compelling doctrinal reasons for drawing the cutoff point at the formless emancipation. What do you understand by that? We infer, noun is inference, right? We infer means the term is anumana in logic. We infer, inference. That means we do not have direct evidence for something, but based on the circumstantial reasons, we infer. We infer means we rationally, we think it is the case. So that is the infer. Now when we study logic, we have two things, perception and inference, pratyaksha and anumana. So anumana is what we do in logic. So infer. We infer that the compilers of the sutta had compelling doctrinal reasons. What does that mean? Compelling doctrinal reasons? Very forceful, very powerful, very important doctrinal reasons. That is what compelling doctrinal reasons. Now, the reasons for drawing the cutoff point. What does that mean? For drawing the cutoff point. What is the cutoff point here spoken? What is the cutoff point referred to here? What does it mean to say cutoff point? Say it. I didn't hear that. No. Actually, in this discussion, the Bhikkhu Bodhi refers to a cutoff point. What is the cutoff point? Pardon me? Extract. Not really. No, what is meant by cutoff point is this. Now, Susima asks questions only about arupa. That is the cutoff point. Now, Susima could ask questions about rupa jhana also, but he doesn't ask questions about rupa jhana. He asks questions from these monks only about arupa. So, Bhikkhu Bodhi says, why that cutoff point? Because he doesn't go beyond that. Actually, the Susima could ask from these monks whether they had the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. But he doesn't ask about those things. He stops at arupa. So in other words, he talks about only arupa jhanas, but he doesn't come below that. Now why? Now that's an important question. That is what Bhikkhu Bodhi is trying to answer in this. Because it is not very easy in the Theravada tradition for you to ask about and get the answer. No, we do not have even first jhana. That will be very, the problematic for the tradition, right? Someone to say that, Arahant to say that, no, I do not have first jhana. But for an Arahant to say that I do not have arupa jhana, that's in a way acceptable. So this is the cutoff point really. In the sutta, in further compilers, the sutta had compelling doctrinal reasons for drawing the cutoff point at formless emancipations. So you don't go beyond that. I mean, you don't come down beyond that. So you stop at, when we say cutoff point, it is implied that these monks had rupa jhanas. What they did not have is only arupa jhanas, right? Now, the question is, why this cutoff point? Why you assume that the monks have rupa jhanas? Only the question was about arupa jhanas. Now, this is, I think, Bhikkhu Bodhi trying to show that here there is a problem, because in the Theravada tradition, traditionally we don't want to accept that someone can become an arahant without having rupa jhanas at least, right? So, now if Venerable Susima questioned about rupa jhanas, Patama jhana, Dutiya, Tatiya and Chatutta, then if the monks answered, no, we do not have, then it will be a problematic thing for the tradition. So here you can see the cutoff point is arupa. However, in the Sarvastivada tradition, when you read towards the end, you will see, according to Sarvastivada tradition version, Susima asks from those monks from the rupa jhana, and they say, no, we do not have first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Also, they do not have arupa jhana. Now, that's a different tradition. So, according to that tradition, someone can become an arahant even without the first jhana. Now, this is the whole issue. Now, you can see, so you have to keep this in mind, okay? So, the whole thing is, we may infer that the compilers of the sutta had compelling doctrinal reasons for drawing the cutoff point at the formless emancipation. For them to permit Susima to ask the monks whether or not they had attained jhanas, and then to have monks give negative answers to these questions would have been to directly contradict time-hallowed discourses and doctrinal formulae. Clear? Because if in the sutta, if the monks, the Susima raised questions from the monk whether they had rupa jhanas, and then if the monk answered that they don't have rupa jhanas, then it would have been directly contradict time-hallowed discourses. Time-hallowed discourses means the discourses that have been accepted as the Buddha's discourses for a long time. Discourses and doctrinal formulae. It seems to me that the compilers of this wish to insinuate that the monks were actually non-attainers of the jhanas, that they subtly want to introduce into the canon the idea of the arahant who lacks this distinguished state of concentration. Now, that is what Bhikkhu Bodhi thinks. It seems to me, now Bhikkhu Bodhi says, it seems to me that the compilers of this sutta wish to insinuate. Now, insinuate means not say something directly, but indirectly give an impression. So, in other words, the compilers of this discourse, they cannot say directly that these monks did not have rupa jhana. But Bhikkhu Bodhi thinks that they wanted to insinuate or indicate indirectly that the monks were actually non-attainers of the jhanas. The monks did not have any jhanas. That they subtly introduced the canon The idea of Arahant who lacks this distinguished state of concentration. Now, that is an interesting statement. So, according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, Susima Sutta was compiled indirectly to say that monks could attain nirvana without jhana. Now, this is what Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's interpretation. Now, Reverend, when you read critically, you should capture that statement. Okay, this is what Bhikkhu Bodhi thinks about this sutta. Now, you assess these things and you read carefully. If you think that Bhikkhu Bodhi's understanding of the sutta is incorrect, I mean, you must be able to write your own paper on that, right? You must be able to write on your own paper about it, saying that Bhikkhu Bodhi's this understanding is not correct. I mean, it is an academic exercise. There is absolutely no harm. That doesn't mean that we don't have a respect for Bhikkhu Bodhi. Of course, we have the greatest respect for the Bhikkhu Bodhi. But at the same time, this is what he thinks, because he thinks that he asked the question, why this sutta was compiled. I mean, when whoever compiled this sutta, when they did that, they must have some idea. So what the Bhikkhu Bodhi seem to be saying is something like this. Okay, in the Theravada tradition, you cannot directly say that anyone can attain arhanthood without having jhanas. But on the other hand, he thinks that this sutta tries to indirectly, without directly saying, indirectly insinuate that one can attain arahanthood without jhanas. But of course, it is up to you, because all of us are independent Buddhist scholars, so we can think about whether Bhikkhu Bodhi, I mean, you can, if you want, you can accept what the Bhikkhu Bodhi says, or you can reject what the Bhikkhu Bodhi says. But if we accept, then we must be convinced about what the Bhikkhu Bodhi says here. Or if we reject it, then we must also have a good reasons. Okay? I mean, we can't say Bhikkhu Bodhi is an American, and those are not good reasons. But we must have some other better reasons to say that no, what the Bhikkhu Bodhi says is not true. Or if you can say, the interpretation, the sutta can be interpreted differently, and so on and so forth. So remember, this sentence is very important in understanding what is it. Yes, Venerable.
I don't know about the Sri Lankan tradition.
Okay.
Burmese tradition, if we follow the meditation proper way, so we can achieve this arahanthood without having jhana state. That if we can remove defilements, the person who can remove the defilement is called arahanta. But it may not be attained the jhana.
Okay.
So we accept such kind of idea. As you know, in the Dhammapada, the first story, Chakubala Mahathera, he achieved
Sukha Vipassaka. Yes. Is that, Venerable, is that the entire Burmese tradition accept that, or only some?
No. The entire Burmese
really?
tradition accept like that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I don't know if Sri Lanka.
No, actually in Sri Lanka, the interesting thing is now nobody is debating about it, but about say 40, 50 years ago, there was this debate. In Sri Lanka, there is a very big opposition, particularly this Venerable came in who wrote articles, and then he also wrote a couple of books in English, and they are in the firm belief that you have to have jhanas in order to attain arahant. So without jhana, at least in the first or second, third, fourth, I mean, there's no discussion about the arupa jhana very much. But the rupa jhana, you have to have, I mean, that is basically the Sri Lankan tradition that was. But today, actually, meditation practice, as you said, is also influenced by Burmese tradition. So, not much emphasis is made.
Sometimes authors' understanding may be different.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think some the foreign students, they use jhana, referring to samadhi.
Right.
Sometimes we feel like the quality of samadhi and the quality of jhana are different.
In fact, samadhi and jhana can be two different things, because I don't think you can attain panya without samadhi, because sila samadhi panya is there. But whether samadhi involves really attaining jhanas, that's a different thing. But I think, what do you think about this Pa Auk Sayadaw? I think he is very much following the Visuddhimagga method, and according to, I think, his methods, you need jhanas, right? So the Burmese tradition also, there are some practitioners, there are some teachers who think that Visuddhimagga method is the...
Actually, they don't use jhana, they use samadhi.
Okay, it's only the word. Yeah, but I don't think anybody can deny that you need samadhi, because how can you say that without samadhi you can, because it is sila samadhi panya. But then jhana, whether you need the jhana, whether you need to attain jhana, that's an open point. So anyhow, this is a long drawn debate. I think this particular sentence is very important here. It seems to me that the compilers of this sutta wish to insinuate that the monks were actually not attainers of the jhanas, that they subtly want to introduce into the canon the idea of arahant who lacks these distinguished states of concentration. At the same time, however, they did not want to force any ambiguity that was hovering over the notion of the wisdom-liberated arahant to become resolved too starkly in black and white terms. Now, what that means is, on the other hand, okay, they indirectly wanted to introduce the idea that one can attain nibbana without jhana. But on the other hand, they did not want to give a exactly yes and no type answer. So rather they leave it in the little bit darkness for that, people to think. But so two things. One thing is, the sutta want to indirectly imply that, the jhanas are no needed. But on the other hand, they did not want to force an ambiguity that was hovering over the notion of the wisdom-liberated arahant to become resolved too starkly in black and white terms. That means the compilers of the discourse did not want to say directly that the wisdom-liberated arahant does not have jhanas. So that they did not want to say. So they want to leave that little bit open.
Yeah, what does mean the jhana? Jhana is flying or jhana is concentration?
No, Venerable, I think the difference here is, now if you take samadhi, samadhi is the concentration, right? Kusala, chitta, ekaggata, samadhi. But jhanas are the levels of levels of absorption, which means that at jhanas what happens is, jhanas is a particular specific state of mind in which you take away your senses from the external world. But when you have samadhi means you have the kusala chitta ekaggata. But jhana means you are not part of this sensory experience. Now that is what jhana means according to my understanding. So in the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, what you do is you gradually take away your 5 senses from external world. So when you are in the first jhana, you are not connected with the other external world. So for a few moments or few minutes or few hours or whatever, according to your training, you can just get into your room and lock your door. Something like that. Now, the jhanas gradually in an increasing manner take you away from that. Ultimately, the 4th arupa jhana is neva sanya, na sanyayatana samadhi, right? Sanya means perception. Sanya means perception. What is the perception? Perception means see things from the eyes, hear things from the ears, smell things from the nose. Perception is that. So in ultimate arupa jhana, neva sanya, na sanya, your perception is almost gone, right? Which means external world doesn't exist for you, right? If I don't see anything, world doesn't exist to me. If I don't hear anything, world doesn't exist to me. So Venerable, there is a very important distinction between samadhi and jhana. Samadhi is the concentrated mind, but with the concentrated mind, you practice vipassana. But when you are in a jhana, you don't practice anything. You are just inside. You are just like going on, locking your room and you are inside. But you are not doing anything else. Within the jhana, you can't do anything. Within the jhana, you are not talking. Within the jhana, you are just in a special condition till you come out. Maybe at the very beginning, you can be like in a jhana couple of seconds. Maybe after that 5 minutes. Maybe after that 1 hour. So when you gradually develop it, suppose, people are shouting and lot of noisy and all that, I go to jhana. So then I don't hear anything. So in order to get rid of troubled world, I get into jhana. But samadhi is not like that. When people are shouting and doing all these things, you can still be in the samadhi, but not in the jhana. Anyway, correct me if I am wrong. This is how I see the difference. So here the idea is, I don't think in the Dhamma there is any debate about whether you need samadhi or not. There is no debate about that. You need samadhi, definitely. Okay? Without samadhi you can attain panya. But without jhana, maybe whether you can go to panya or not is the issue here. So the Susima's question starts from the arupa. But the whole question is, why arupa? Why not talking about rupa? Rupa jhana. So this is the issue. Okay. Is that clear now? What is the problem going on here? Because this is an important question actually. The Nikayas, the page 56, the Nikayas distinguish among different classes of Arahant, using as the basis for the distinctions the attainments they possess ancillary to their attainments of Arahantship. What is ancillary to the attainment? Ancillary means subordinate, before, next to the Arahanthood. So ancillary to the attainment of Arahanthood. In descending order, some Arahant possess 6 direct knowledge, Chalabhinya. Some have 3 higher knowledge. Some are liberated in both ways, and some are liberated by wisdom. In descending order means you have the highest one first, and next one next, the third one, and then the lowest in the category is liberated by wisdom. The main distinction that the Nikayas draw is between those Arahant liberated in both ways and those liberated by wisdom. So the real distinction according to the discourses is only 2 categories. Now these 2 categories are Arahant liberated by wisdom and Arahant liberated by both ways. So we have on the one hand Arahants liberated by both ways, and then Arahants liberated by wisdom. Now these are the 2 main categories. When you say Arahant liberated by both ways, they refer to basically Cheto Vimutta and Panya Vimutta. So you are both liberated in both ways. However, when you have Panya Vimutta, the word used by bhikkhus is Nijjanaka. We are Nijjanakas. We don't have jhanas. But when you simply say you don't have jhanas, it's very interesting because they simply say they don't have jhanas. But they don't say whether they don't rupa jhanas or arupa jhanas. Simply the answer is that they don't have jhanas. So the Arahant liberated by wisdom, in contrast, is one who does not contact with the body and dwell in those peaceful emancipations, transcending forms and the formless, but whose influxes are exhausted by his seeing with wisdom. So in the tradition, you can see that this has been the main thing, main bone of contention, you can say. And page 57, you have the Puggala Panyati commentary maintains that those who attain the formless attainments but do not gain attainment to cessation are called liberated by both ways. Only in a figurative sense, paryayena. Of course, those are the details you have about how Puggala Panyati commentary. Paryayena means in a figurative sense. That means as a way of saying, paryayena means that. While those who gain the 8 attainments, 4 jhanas and the 4 formless attainments, as well as the attainment of cessation are called the best of those liberated in both ways. Now, according to Puggala Panyati, even among those who are liberated both ways, there is a distinction. There are some arahants who cannot attain Nirodha Samapatti. There are some who can attain Nirodha Samapatti. In the same commentary, however, then concedes that an arahant who attains just one among the formless sphere jhanas can still be called liberated in both ways. So that means, even though the cutoff point there is Nirodha Samapatti, the same commentary says that even with one of the formless arupa jhanas, you can attain arahanthood. Now, actually looking at the Dhamma and the discussion, how do we understand this? Why the commentaries say that, okay, this is up to Nirodha Samapatti, but even without Nirodha Samapatti in Arupa Jhanas, you can attain Nirvana. Now, there can be two situations. One situation is nobody was sure about who is an Arahant and how is one becomes an Arahant. Now, that is why, that's one way to read it. Of course, that is not a very kind way to read it, but you can say that commentators did not know who is an Arahant really. That's why they say, okay, even this is possible, even this is possible. The other possibility is that there is no one single way to become an Arahant. One can become an Arahant in the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, arupa jhana. So it could be the case, depending on different people and depending on different people's capacities vendable, people can become Arahant in many different manners. But you cannot become an Arahant without destroying your old defilements. There is no doubt about that. But before that, how many jhanas you have attained, and these things can differ from person to person. Okay. Now, this may be the reason, because otherwise, we really don't know. As I said the other day, we know that Venerable Buddha Ghosha was not an Arahant, as we believe, right? So he is also but great Dharmadhara. But there can be many Arahant who are not Dharmadharas like Venerable Buddha Ghosha, right? So becoming an Arahant, becoming an educated, learned Dharmadhara monk, two different things. So the Arahant can be less educated, but Prutajjanas can be more educated. It could be, okay. Just go further into page 57, second paragraph. The Arahant liberated by wisdom, it is clear, has the fourth jhana as the upper limit of achievement on the scale of concentration. For some reason not explained in the suttas, an Arahant of this type does not proceed further to attain formless emancipation. So basically, idea is that you don't go to get arupa jhana, but of course you can be first jhana, second, third, or even you can go up to the fourth. The more interesting question, however, concerns the minimal attainment in concentration possessed by an Arahant liberated by wisdom. Now the thing is, the more interesting question concerns the minimal attainment in concentration possessed by an Arahant liberated by wisdom. Now the question is, when you talk about the Arahant who is liberated by wisdom, what is the minimal? What is the lowest level of concentration, attainment? What is the attainment level of, the lowest level? The question is, can we really attain without even the first jhana? Or whether the first jhana is the lower limit, or you don't need even the first jhana? Now that's the important question. A number of standard texts define the concentration included in several groups and 37 aids of Bodhipakya Dhamma and so on. Now, read the very last sentence of that page 57. If we rely upon these texts, taking them literally, it would follow that any monk liberated by wisdom must have attained all 4 jhanas. Now, this is what basically the discourses seem to say. Bodhi says, if we rely upon these texts, taking them literary. What is man taking them literary? literally. Now, there are two ways of understanding text. One way to understand is the literal, exactly what the words say. The other one is, what is called paryayena, figuratively. You can not the what the words say, but what the words try to say. Okay, so that is, of course, you are trying to understand something figuratively. So, but if you just directly understand these texts, the conclusion is that it would follow that any monk liberated by wisdom must have attained all 4 jhanas. Now, this is the conclusion we can draw from the Pali discourses. So, any monk who has liberated from wisdom, Panya Vimutta, has 4 jhanas. Now, if that is the case, then of course, there is no question about the need of the jhanas. You do need the first 4 jhanas, otherwise you can be even Panya Vimutta. On the one hand, Panya Vimuttas are described as Nijjhanakas, but on the other hand, that the discourses seem to be saying that without having the first 4 jhanas, you cannot attain Panya Vimutta. Now, look at that sentence again, not for the Dhamma, but for English. If we rely upon these texts, taking them literally, it would follow. What is the meaning of this word follow? What is the significance of that word follow? It would follow that any monk liberated by wisdom must have. Now, the Reverend, that word follow here is used in a logical sense. Follow means like you give certain things as your premises, and then from those premises, conclusion follows means conclusion comes naturally. You cannot draw any other conclusion. That is what it means to say follow. So, when you read these suttas, it follows means you cannot draw any other conclusion. So, your conclusion follows from these things. Do you see that? So, in a logical language, we usually say that conclusion follows from the premises. I will give you a simple example. In logic, we say something like that. So, this is a pretty simple, the logical example, Now, we say that, look at this, 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 6. Now, if you put this 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus equals 6, you cannot derive any other conclusion. If this is your conclusion, from these things it follows that this is 6, right? Because when you add 2 to 2 to 2, it follows that your conclusion is 6. Because you cannot draw a different conclusion. Do you see that? So that is the logical sense. In other words, we can say something like that. Look at this. All Now, if you look at this, all human beings are mortal. Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. Now, this is your conclusion. We can say that this conclusion follows from these premises. This conclusion follows from these premises. This is the premise number 1, this is the premise number 2, and then this is your conclusion. So, we can say from these 2, this follows. What does it mean is you can't get any other conclusion from that. If number 1 sentence is true, if number 2 sentence is true, number 3 is true without any problem, right? So therefore, in your writing, when you use the word follow means it follows logically. You cannot draw any other conclusion, okay? So remember that, because whenever we write, we use the language. This is what it means. If we rely upon these texts, taking them literally, it would follow that any monk liberated by wisdom must have attained all. Now, this is what if we think that these discourses are true, then it necessarily follows from that nobody can attain arahanthood without having the first. Now, page 58, such a conclusion, however, would be extreme for other texts equally authoritative recognize the possibility of attaining arahantship on the basis of any jhana. Now, on the other hand, he says, okay, the suttas quoted up to that point unanimously say that you have to have all 4 jhanas. But then in the next paragraph, page 58, he says, when you look at some other discourses, say for in the Anguttara Nikaya, they seem to be saying somewhat little different. Namely, that you don't need all 4, you can attain arahanthood from any one of 4 jhanas. Maybe the first jhana, second, third, or even fourth. Now you see, the textual reading and interpretation is not very easy. You see here, because there are different suttas giving us different emphasis on things, you know. So in our academic studies, we must be able to see all these suttas, all the evidence. Now suppose Bhikkhu Bodhi did not mention these suttas, then his writing is not complete. But in your own assessment, when you read this, if you find the interesting sutta that was not mentioned by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and then if you find that sutta gives a totally different conclusion, then of course you can write an article saying that, you know, in this article Bhikkhu Bodhi did not see there is this important sutta which gives a different, that is what we academically do. So such a conclusion. For example, Jhana Sutta Anguttara Nikaya 936 explain that one can gain any one of the 4 jhanas or lower 3 formless attainments and then contemplate its constituents in 11 ways and so on. One can attain nirvana. Then again in the Attaka Nagara Sutta Majjhima Nikaya, I am in the middle of that paragraph, Ananda explained how it is possible to attain the exhaustion of influxes through any of the 11 doors to the deathlessness. Now that's again, one enters any of the 4 jhanas. Now these are examples that first set of suttas seem to indicate that you have to have all 4. But now in the page 58, we have another set of discourses seem to be saying that no, you can attain, arahanthood from any of these things. Okay, that paragraph, this would imply that the texts that define the faculty of concentration, the right concentration of the noble path, and the training in the higher mind as the 4 jhanas should not be taken literally as meaning all 4 jhanas are needed to reach liberation. Now the conclusion is that Bhikkhu Bodhi suggests that although discourses seem to be saying that we need all 4 jhanas, you put together all the discourses that discuss this matter, then he says that not all 4 jhanas are needed, maybe one of them. Rather, they mean that to attain the final goal, as the wisdom liberated arahant, one should be able to gain at least 1 jhana as the basis of insight. So, from these discourses, Bhikkhu Bodhi want to suggest that at least you have to have one jhana. Look at the next paragraph. We might, however, ask whether even this much is indispensable. Now, that paragraph is very important. Now, Bhikkhu Bodhi moves to somewhat little bit different set of discourses. We might, however, ask whether even this much is indispensable. Indispensable means cannot do without. Now, the question is now, of course, okay, first set of discourses indicated you need all 4 jhanas. Then, page 58, he refers to certain discourses which seem to say that you don't need all 4, you need any one of them. Okay. Now we move into the second paragraph in page 58. There, Bhikkhu Bodhi seems to be presenting some suttas even that may be not needed. Now you see gradually coming down, first it was all 4 jhanas, and then maybe 1 jhana. Now in the second paragraph, page 58, you see that somewhat different evidence. Kindly read that very carefully among yourself. We might, however, ask whether even this much is indispensable. In raising this question, we are pushing our line of inquiry further than Susima dared to go in his conversation with monks. So now, of course, Susima went up to only Arupa jhana. He didn't question before that. But then asking this question, Bhikkhu Bodhi says, he's going even beyond that. Yet, in view of the direction meditation theory has taken in the mainstream Buddhist tradition, it is precisely this question that should pique our curiosity. This should be really the one that really probes into our curiosity. Because, the whole question is whether you need any jhana. Because as the Venerable mentioned, in the Burmese tradition seems to be thinking that usually you don't need jhanas. So the whole question is, the issue is that whether you need... Now if we read certain suttas in their face value, it would seem that the first jhana is the minimum. Now look at this. If we read certain suttas at their face value, what do you mean by that? If you read certain suttas at the face value means, it's like reading the suttas literally. You read literally. You read just on the surface, not without going into deep into it. You just look at the sutta, face value. That's what it face value. Or you read the sutta superficially. That is what it means by when you say face value. It would seem that the first jhana is a minimum requirement. So it looks like the first jhana is a minimum requirement. Then he says, a text that lends strong support to this claim is the Mahamalunke Sutta, where Buddha declares there is Ananda, a path to the abandoning of the 5 lower fetters, that anyone without relying on that path shall know or see abandon 5 lower fetters. This is impossible. As the Sutta unfolds, the path to abandoning the 5 lower fetters is then shown to be the same course of practice described just above in the Jhana Sutta. One enters any of the 4 jhanas or 3 lower formless attainments and then contemplates. Now you can see that there are certain suttas giving somewhat different emphasis. Now if one can remain firm in his contemplation, one exhausts the influxes and reaches arahantship. If there is still remnant of attachment, then he will become a non-returner. If the above words, that anyone without relying on that path shall know or see abandon the 5 lower fetters, this is impossible, are taken as categorical. There is indeed no possibility at all that an arahant liberated by wisdom can be destitute of the first jhana. Now, Reverend, based on these 2 things, this is a strong evidence. At least you have to have the first jhana, otherwise no. Now, of course, there are other suttas behind. Now, this is impossible. So, attanametang anamakaso. You can never attain arahanthood without at least the first jhana. Now, this is very interesting because, when you go on analyzing these suttas, you can see certain things are changing. But these 2 particular suttas, Malunke Putta Sutta, according to it, it is impossible, are taken as categorical. What is categorical? Categorical means conclusive, final, no change. That is categorical. There is indeed no possibility that at all that an arahant liberated by wisdom cannot be destitute of. Cannot be destitute of means cannot be without first jhana. Then he refers to, it will not suffice either to appeal to the Abhidhamma, distinction between form sphere, Rupavachara and Supramandan Lokuttara, jhanas, and then hold that while some arahant liberated by wisdom might be destitute of mundane jhanas, they will still possess at least the first supramundane jhanas. Now, according to Abhidhamma, they make a distinction between mundane jhana and supramundane jhana. So, according to Abhidhamma, even though an arahant doesn't have mundane jhana, arahant always has supramundane jhana, lokuttara jhana. But Bhikkhu Bodhi says, that's not helpful. Okay, we move on to page 60, and then the paragraph. Although the words of Maha Malunkya Sutta quoted above might seem to rule out the possibility that those destitute of jhana can achieve arahantship, several texts scattered across Nikayas hint that this conclusion would be a bit stern. Now, what does that mean? Now, if we really interpret Mahamalunkyā, it looks like that Mahamalunkyā saying that no one can attain arahanthood at least without the first jhana. That is what the Mahamalunkyā Buddha said. But then Bhikkhu Bodhi says, second paragraph, the beginning paragraph, page 60, although the words of Mahamalunkyā Sutta quoted above might seem rule out possibility that those destitute of, without jhana, can achieve arahanthood, there are several texts scattered in the Nikayas hint that this conclusion would be a bit stern. Bit stern means to conclude that no one can attain arahanthood without at least the first jhana would be a too strict conclusion, because there are some other suttas indicating somewhat differently. Now look at the next sentence. We should remember that while the suttas are remarkably consistent with each other, they are not rigidly so, and one can often find in some texts exceptions made to principles apparently laid down as categorical in other texts. Now what does that mean? What do you understand by that statement? While the suttas are remarkably consistent with each other, what does it mean? Now there is a problem here. The problem is, if different discourses say different things about attaining arahanthood, then someone can say that, look, these discourses are not consistent with each other. One sutta says something, and then another sutta says something different. Then the question is, you can raise a question about the discourses. Discourses are not consistent. But now that is not a very good thing for us to say about the Buddha, right? If the Buddha taught the Dhamma, Dhamma cannot be totally different and contradicting with each other. So, you can't say that. We should remember that while the suttas are remarkably consistent with each other, although they are not rigidly so. They are not rigidly so means, actually when you say they are not rigidly so means, although suttas tally with each other, there are certain places where certain exceptions are permitted. Okay? Yes, something like this. You can have, say, 90% of the discourses saying one thing, but there can be 10% of the discourses saying somewhat differently. Now, there's a very interesting, important question here. How do we know that? Whether Buddha said these things or not. Now, this is why Buddha gave this Chattaro Mahapadesa in Chattaro Mahapadesa in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, where, how you can determine whether a particular discourse is taught by the Buddha or not. So we have those methods. But Bhikkhu Bodhi says that although they are consistent, they are not rigidly so. And one can often find in some texts exceptions made to principles. So there are certain texts, certain discourses where exceptions are there. Exceptions, like alternative rules are there. Although Buddha says something almost categorically, there are some other discourses, where things have been said differently. Then he says one discourse relevant to our present discussion is Asubha Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 4.163, speaks about 4 modes of practice. Too painful, with sluggish and quick realization. Too pleasant, again with sluggish and quick realization. This is a very interesting thing. I think in my Kathavattu discussion I told you about this Anupubbabi Samayoti, whether realization is gradual. Now in the Pali text we have this Dukkha Patipada Kippa Abhinya, Dukkha Patipada Dandha Abhinya, Sukha Patipada Kippa Abhinya, Sukha Patipada Dandha Abhinya. So the practice is Sukha Patipada or Dukkha Patipada. Practice is easy or practice is painful. Kippa Abhinya, Dandha Abhinya, realization is quick or realization is slow. So these categories. Now the next paragraph and the quotation describes this painful Dukkha Patipada and Sukha Patipada. Read up to the end of first paragraph in page 61. Basically what it means, Sukha Patipada means you practice the path with the jhanas. Dukkha Patipada means you practice the path without the jhanas. So if you practice the path with jhanas, of course it is Sukha Patipada. If you practice the path without jhanas, then it is without, I mean like Dukkha Patipada. Now the conclusion of that section is page 61, end of first paragraph. This alternative definition defines the faculty of concentration not as the four jhanas, but as the concentration or one-pointedness of mind that arises having made release the object. So there it doesn't talk about the jhanas, it talks about one-pointedness. Then next paragraph, a similar contrast is drawn, Anguttara Nikaya 4.169, between those persons who attain Nibbana through strenuous practice, Sasankhara Paranibbayi, and non-strenuous practice, Asankhara Paranibbayi. Again, you have a similar description. Then we move on to the page 62, very first beginning of the paragraph. Read that sentence carefully. The Nikayas never go so far as to say that those who choose such meditation subjects as their vehicle of practice lack attainment of jhana. And accordingly, when questioning the monk who claimed to be Arahant liberated by wisdom, Susima does not pursue his inquiry below the level of peaceful, formless emancipations and ask whether or not they attain jhanas. The issue is left daintily alone, as though it were too sensitive to be touched upon. The issue is left daintily alone. Daintily means very softly, very without even yourself not knowing, you just leave the question without asking. That's what has happened. So you don't simply ask the question. The issue is left daintily alone, as though it would be too sensitive to be touched upon. Read on. Perhaps the stock definition of the path factor of right concentration in terms of four jhanas and the role of the jhanas in the standard description of the gradual training of the monk occupied niches too hallowed within the canonical collection for the Theravada tradition to ever consider altering the received heritage of suttas in a way that might explicitly state such attainments are dispensable. Now, what the Bhikkhu Bodhi seem to be think is the standard account of the path. The standard account of the path is you go from Sila, Sila to Samadhi, Samadhi means Jhana, from Jhana to Panya. Stock definition of the path. Stock definition means this is the definition what you find in almost all the suttas. Right? If you take 90% of the suttas, path is described in only basically one manner. That you need Sila, then you go to Samadhi with jhanas, and then you go to Panya. So the need for Samadhi is accepted almost in many cases. And the role of jhanas in the standard description of the gradual training occupied niches too hallowed within the canonical collection for the Theravada tradition to ever consider altering. Can you see that? Occupied niches. Occupied a niche means you have a permanent place for something. occupy a niche means a way of saying that in a particular system or in a place, you have a permanent place to stay. It's like this, sometimes in a building or something, we have the picture of the, say, owner in one particular place. You never change that place because that place is the owner's place. So niche means that. So you have a permanent niche means in the path, you have a permanent place, you don't feel like changing it. So, it's something like that. Theravada ever to consider altering the received heritage of suttas in a way that might explicitly state that attainments are dispensable. Such attainments are dispensable. Dispensable means you can do without them. So the Theravada tradition never want to say that attainments, jhanas are dispensable. Because the Theravada view is jhanas are indispensable. You cannot dispense them with. You cannot do without them. But then on the other hand, there are here and there discourses seeming to be indicating that jhanas may not be needed. Yet it is among those who use such subjects of meditation as the unattractiveness of the body, mindfulness of the death, disenchantment with the world, and the impermanence of all formations as their preferred vehicle that one might expect to find arahant liberated by wisdom. Now that is very interesting. Who are the arahant liberated by wisdom? Why someone becomes an arahant liberated by wisdom? According to discourses, Bhikkhu Bodhi says that it looks like that if you meditate on Asubha Bhavana. Now Asubha Bhavana, Asubha practice is not an easy thing to practice. Right? In the ancient days, you have to go to a cemetery and see, dead bodies. But today, of course, there is no way that you can practice Asubha Bhavana, right? You will never see dead bodies undecorated. Dead bodies are more beautiful than living people, decorated in, such a way. So, Asubha Bhavana is not very easy. So, even those days, Asubha Bhavana was not very easy thing to practice. So, the people who practice that type of meditations, it appears that they are not people who attain jhanas and follow the path they seem to be. So, this is one way of reading that. Arahant liberate. And because practitioners of these meditations are contrasted with those who take the pleasant route of the four jhanas, it is among the former that one might expect to find by implication those who either attain jhanas with difficulty or opt instead for a mode of practice that draws its primary strength from the wisdom built upon the minimum degree of serenity, samatha. Now, minimum degree of serenity, samatha. Of course, there is no argument that you must not have samatha. I mean, the samatha, samadhi is needed. But whether you need jhana is the open question. Okay? Up to this point, what do you think? Do you follow the argument? What means, what Bhikkhu Bodhi is trying to say in this, and, he talks about different, discourses. Actually, you must be able to, it will be a good academic exercise if you can summarize, different sections of this paper. Because, if you cannot summarize, then of course you cannot be critiquing his paper anyway. First, it is very important that we understand what Bhikkhu Bodhi is doing very well. Then only you will be able to say, okay, this is not good, this is not good. But the first step is try to summarize each section for your own use, and then see whether you really follow the sequence of argument. Now here what the Bhikkhu Bodhi seems to be doing is, gradually he is showing that in the discourses, although the discourses, majority of the discourses are very clear about need for jhanas, there are certain discourses indicating that maybe you don't need the jhana. But Theravada tradition doesn't say that very clearly. Although it doesn't say it, it appears that according to Bhikkhu Bodhi's interpretation. So what you can do is actually, if you want to really critically study Bhikkhu Bodhi's article, you must read all the discourses he refers to here. You take this article and then read all the discourses he is referring, and to see that whether you can draw the same conclusion. Now, if you really think that, okay, Bhikkhu Bodhi has correctly read and understood the sutta, then you can agree with him. Otherwise, when you read, because very often you have only a quotation, only one paragraph, right? But this is not the whole sutta. But if you read the whole sutta, sometimes in the academic writing, some people quote only what support them. In the same document, there can be certain things that are not supportive to your argument. People don't quote them. But that is not good academically. You really have to look at the complete article and see whether it, the whole thing supports your conclusion or not. So therefore, if you really are interested in, looking at Bhikkhu Bodhi's arguments and see whether his analysis of textual evidence is good, then you have to look at those suttas. Particularly, you have to look at these two instances which are Anguttara Nikaya 4, 163. That's important. And also Anguttara Nikaya 4, 169. Look at these two suttas by yourself and see whether Bhikkhu Bodhi has correctly interpreted them. Okay? Any questions up to this point? Pardon me? Use that, Reverend.
Augadi Sinu Soda.
Which one?
In the Anguttara Nikaya. They are 4% in the world. Augadi Sinu Bogala, we, Denu Bogala, Nea Bogala, Bata Brahma Bogala. So Augadi Denu Bogala means one can liberate it by hearing short Dhamma talk by the Buddha. Like a Venerable Sariputta, he knows Dhamma only one person. We Denu Bogalas mean he can liberate long Dhamma, long Soda. Long Soda mean like a Venerable Yahula. The whole like Dhammatika Varana Soda. The whole Soda, if they out that they hear in long Soda, they can liberate. Number 3.
So you are referring to Neya, is that
Neya,
right?
yes, Neya. Neya Bogalas me.
So what is your question? Okay, there are differences among these people in understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we are number one, we don't need to practice jhana. No?
What is the number one category?
Number 1 is Augadi Tinyu Bogala.
Uggati Tanyu Puggala.
The highest person.
Okay. Who says that you don't need jhanas? Commentary.
Some Siaro, they say if we are near Bogala, we need jhana. No?
Now look, Reverend, it's true because according to your view, some Siado has said that, Uggati Tanyu Puggala doesn't need. Maybe commentary also may be supporting it or not. See, this is very interesting because the commentary, some Siado's view, and all these things we have to go by ultimately by the text, by the discourses. Okay. Now, if you take Sutta, Suttanuloma, Acharyavada, Attanomati. So some Siado means Attanomati. Okay. Samthera. And then commentary means Acharyavada. But before that we have Suttanuloma, even before that we have Sutta. Now this is the, the sequence. Sutta, Suttanuloma, Acharyavada, Attanomati. Anyhow, having said that, now this very discussion by Bhikkhu Bodhi shows that even the discourses are open to interpretation. Discourses seem to be not saying the same thing, Reverend. Now this is very important. Forget about the Sayados, forget about the commentaries. Look at the discourses themselves. Now discourses seem to be saying somewhat different things. But then how are we going to understand? One way to would be to say that Buddha was not saying the same thing. Buddha was saying different thing. But of course, we don't think that is the right way to look at it. But then, on the other hand, why there are certain slight differences in the discourses? So here you will have to really analyze the discourses very carefully. Because if we accept that Buddha knew what he was saying, of course Buddha knew what he was saying, then we can't expect Buddha to contradict himself. So therefore, suttas. So now here the important question is, larger majority of the discourses seem to be saying something quite in a similar manner, consistently. However, there are certain discourses that seem to be saying somewhat differently. Now the question is, how to understand, how to interpret these things. Now according to Mahapadesa, we can say that if 90% discourses agree with something, if 10% discourses don't agree, put away those things, keep those things aside. You go by 90%. Because, that is one way to do that. But on the other hand, like Buddha taught the Dhamma to many different people, right? And then how many different people attain the Nibbana is, there are so many ways. Now, one good example is in the Sanyutta Nikaya, you have Bahya Daruchiriya's case. When Bahya Daruchiriya came to Buddha, when Buddha was going on his Pindapata, Buddha said that, I don't have time to talk to you now, I am on my Pindapata, I am hungry. But then Bahya Daruchiriya didn't want to accept that. He said, no, say something to me. Then finally Buddha said, Ditte dittamattam bhavisasi, sute sutamattam bhavisasi, mute mutamattam bhavisasi, and so on. And Sutta says that Bahya Daruchiriya became an arahant then and there. Now, where is dhyana? What is the path? I will come to you. So, this is the problem. Now, of course, on the other hand, what we forget is, we think that there are so many Bahya Daruchiriyas in the Sasana. But Bahya Daruchiriya is only one. So what the Buddha said to Bahya Daruchiriya may not be applicable to others, right? Because everybody can't be a Bahya Daruchiriya. So Bahya Daruchiriya is a one unique person, and he had developed so much. So what the Buddha said quickly made him realize the truth. But we can't generalize based on that. You can't generalize. You can't say, okay, Buddha said this to Bahya Daruchiriya, so therefore it is applicable to everybody. No. What the Buddha said to Bahya Daruchiriya is applicable only to Bahya Daruchiriya, not to others. But that shows that there can be some people who can attain realization quickly without going through the procedure. But that does not stop the standard procedure taught in the discourses. Right? Venerable.
The similar case with the Bahya Daruchiriya is Minister Mahasantati. Minister also.
Right.
No?
Who was seated in the elephant and is that
he was a drunkard, like commander-in-chief in defense. Okay. So he, after listening to the Dhamma from the Buddha, he realized and then became a Arahant. As a layman, he never practiced meditation. He was a drunkard. He drank. Many cases explained in Dhammapara Athagaras. If Bhikkhu Bodhi's discussion is the truth, if he holds such kind of views, we have to rewrite those Dhammapara Athagaras. We have to rewrite. Okay. But here, his discussion, he mentioned it, Pinya Vimodha. Yeah. So, if a person is Pinya Vimodha to become an Arahant, maybe must need this jhana level as a basic. Actually, if we practice vipassana meditations, we need to practice samatha meditation also, usually, because samadhi is a very supportive power.
Exactly.
Yeah, very supportive power to achieve arahanthood.
The whole issue is venerable between not whether you need samatha or samadhi, but whether you need the jhanas. I think I think there is a distinction between samatha and samadhi on the one hand and the jhana on the other hand. Anyhow, the point of this discussion of Bhikkhu Bodhi is, now you can see that actually I want you to all the graduate scholars here to see this textual analysis of the Dhamma today. Now this article is being written by a Theravada master, right? Now you can see that even among the traditional Theravada masters today, how the textual analysis is being done, okay? So different ways to look at the discourses. Now usually in the very traditional manner, we think that everything is said by the Buddha, so stop at that. But here you can see that because there are different traditions, and then in the different traditions, then when we make the textual study and study the parallels, we can see that sometimes we can get support. You remember I referred to Venerable Purana in one of my earlier discussions. When did I mention? I don't remember. But anyhow, there is a mention of one Venerable Purana in the first Sangayana. And then when the first Sangayana Karaka monks went to him and asked him to accept what he did, Sangayana, Venerable Purana said, well, you may have done it very well, but I will hold the Dhamma the way I have heard from the Buddha. So which means that Venerable Purana had his own, version of the Dhamma. Venerable Mahakassapa and others, when they said him to accept what they did, he said, you must have done it very well, but I will hold the Dhamma the way I have heard from the Buddha. And then he went away. He was, of course, going through Rajagaha, and he went away. But in the Buddhist, in the Buddhist tradition, we never hear about this Venerable Purana before or Venerable Purana after. Where did he go? He had 500 students. So you can see Venerable, the versions of the word of the Buddha, even by the time Buddha attained Parinirvana, there were many Sravakas who had their own memories of the Dhamma. So maybe this is how different versions of Dhamma started arising. Now, for example, Venerable Purana went from Rajagaha. We don't know anything about him where he went, but he must have gone to somewhere, lived with his 500 pupils, and then maybe those 500 pupils had their own pupils. So there was a different tradition. And then they must have had a different version of Buddha's word, different from the Theravada. But we can't say that Venerable Purana is wrong or something, because Venerable Purana was somebody respected by Venerable Mahakassapa and others. So there are that type of evidence in the canon to the existence of versions of the word of the Buddha among different disciples. Okay? So therefore, this is a good example. This work is a good example for us to see how the textual analysis is done today. Okay, we are in page 62. I think I will wind up from here for today. We will, again, when we meet our next session, we will finish this paper and then we will make a little bit more analysis of it. Do you have any questions or any comments or anything to clarify in this?
Any question? You can stand up if you achieve arahanthood without jhana. Anyone? Okay.
Yes.
And greater, Buddha has explained in Anguttara Nikaya, 5 Brahmanga.
Anguttara Nikaya?
Yes, 5 Brahmanga. I think we should discuss this Buddha in this issue.
What is the name of the sutta?
Brahmanga. 5 Brahmanga, 2 again.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't get that. So, okay.
Okay. And for example, Arada really like that, yeah, branding idea. If we end up with this 5 feather, we can gain nirvana within 7 days like that. So how do you think this 5 feathers and Bhikkhu body's explanation of this Sansuma Sutta?
Well, the whole discussion about 5 fetters, and also similar thing you get in the Satipatthana Sutta. Satipatthana Sutta says that if you practice Satipatthana well, then finally, within 7 days, and it goes on like that ultimately. So, Venerable, I think we need to understand these things in the correct context. Although Buddha says that, okay, you can attain nirvana within 7 days if you practice Satipatthana, it doesn't say anything about jhana or anything, but that means that alone with Satipatthana covers everything. So when you say Kaya, Vedana, Chitta, Dhamma, it covers the entire path. So I think although to suit different people, Buddha has used different ways of explaining, there is no really contradiction. But the issue here is whether, in this particular problem, whether we need jhana or not, what Bhikkhu Bodhi trying to show is, there is some evidence to show that some suttas, which do not indicate that we don't need those jhanas. But, ultimately this is a matter of interpretation. How are we going to understand? Now, Theravada commentarial tradition, Venerable Buddha Ghosha, consistently interpret all the discourses to say that we need the jhanas. Now, that's a matter of interpretation. But Buddha sometimes Buddha has not mentioned it particularly. So, ultimately a tradition is the way to interpret and understand the text. So, in the Theravada tradition, the commentarial tradition has indicated that Venerable Buddha Ghosha has indicated that, you need this. But the problematic thing is, if you take the concept of Sukha Vipassaka, now Sukha Vipassaka concept is not found in the discourses, right?
Yes.
Buddha has never spoken of Sukha Vipassaka. Sukha Vipassaka is a commentarial tradition. Maybe Venerable Buddha Ghosha invented that concept. Now, what is the meaning of Sukha Vipassaka? Dry insight meditator. Dry means it is not moistured by the jhanas. Moisture comes from jhanas. So, dry means no moisture of the jhanas. So, you can see the commentarial tradition itself seem to be indicating that you can attain Arahanthood without jhanas. So, there is no, as I can see, there is no one voice there. Very concept of Sukha Vipassaka is a result of this understanding that you can attain nirvana without jhanas. I mean, that is, today we accept it, but it comes in the commentary, but it is not something that you see in the discourses. So, what it means is ultimately how to understand the discourse is very much a matter of how to interpret it. Okay? And then we have to also admit that very often we make a mistake. We think that, okay, Buddha, for example, you take the path described according to Samanyapala Sutta. Now, according to Samanyapala, if you look at the path, starting from Sila, Indriya, Samvara, first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, it goes. But, do you think that entire path was applicable to everybody? No. But that was the complete path. So Buddha taught complete path there because the king asked what are the results, benefits that you can get from a monastic life. Buddha listed everything. However, that does not mean that in order to attain Arahanthood, each and every person need all these things. No. Now I mentioned Bahya Daruchirya's case. He did not want because he was already a very advanced person when he met the Buddha. He had meditated. He is a very advanced person. Buddha need to just push him a little bit and then he realized. But there are other people who need all these things. There can be other people who need first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. So like that. So we have to make a distinction between the Buddha's exposition of the complete path and applicability of that path for each person. Two different things. Okay. Now, I think when the monks and nuns came to the Buddha for karmasthana, Buddha would tell each person differently, right? Because depending on that person. So, it is one thing to have the complete path as Buddha taught. Good example is Samanyapala. However, that may not be exactly the path for each and every person. For each and every person, there may be differences. Some people go by Asubha Bhavana, some people go by Marananusati, some people go by Metta Bhavana, and so on and so forth. Okay. So, Reverend, there are these distinctions. So, when you read only one sutta or something, you feel that other things are not needed. But when you put all these suttas together, you can see that there is a fairly consistent picture. But take Bhikkhu Bodhi seriously, because he is a very well versed the Theravada monk. So when he refers to these suttas, we have to take those things seriously. However, if you can find some other relevant suttas which Bhikkhu Bodhi doesn't mention here, that will be a good point. That will be a good point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, in Pogla
Yeah.
Veda, Pogla Veda in the Veda.
Puggala Panyati.
Pogla Veda.
Puggala Bheda, okay.
Because arahants can become without jhana and with jhana, like that. There are two types of arahants. That's why according to this sutta here, if we rely upon these texts, taking them literally, it will follow that anyone liberated by wisdom must have attained all four jhana, like that.
Yeah.
So some arahants didn't get any jhana. We accept and receive. That's why should we analyze or to know how to define the meaning of the jhana. Maybe I think so. The definition of the jhana, our understanding and his understanding are different. Do you think so, like that?
It could be, because many people seem to be taking that jhana, samatha and samadhi are similar. But I think they are different from each other. But we really have to go by the definitions, descriptions given by the Buddha. You remember in Dhammapada there is a saying, Natti jhanang apanyasa pannyanatti ajayato. I mean, so you can simply interpret Natti jhanang apanyasa. If you don't have panya, no jhana. And then vice versa. If you don't have jhana, no panya. So jhana and panya are going together. But I think the jhana, samatha, samadhi, at some level, they seem to be indicating the same thing. But as I described earlier, jhana can be a very specific point where you enter to some kind of state of mind. But samatha and samadhi is another state of mind, but you are living and you are working and you are reading and talking and contemplating and meditating. But within the jhana, I don't think you can be meditating, right? If you are in the first jhana, you are in the first jhana. Anyway, don't ask because I have not attained first jhana, so I don't know. But it looks like that. I think we will wind up.
Thank you very much for your participation in discussion. Thank you very much, Professor. You take 2 hours.
The rest of the thing we will do next time. We will read the rest of the thing. Okay.
We can discuss. Some phenomena should be realized by experience. All right? So when I was in India, many students put the question to me after I finished my PhD degree. do you get job in Burma? So I say, no. So if you have job, if you don't have job, how do you get money? So, who will provide you food, accommodations, and transportations? So you see, we don't have job, like a government job and company job. We don't have any type of job. But so we don't have job. That is why they think we don't have any money, any like accommodation and food. We are so poor, looks like beggars. So they think like that. But our life is not much so poor like that. Okay, we should realize some phenomena, some conditions by experience. So if we want to know, it's possible to achieve arhathood, not arhandat, without jhana or with jhanas. You should practice.
You must try, right?
And then we will realize by experience. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Do not forget to switch off the lights. Okay. See the resolution up here.